Hi everyone, welcome to another conversation on transition. Our guests today are Jimmy Murphy and Dean Cracknell, who are the founders of the Town Team movement. I really wanted to explore town teams as a case study for all this stuff that we're talking about in terms of resilience and regeneration. It's a topic really close to my heart. So when I first started dabbling my toes in the water of like social entrepreneurship, that kind of world, the project I devised for myself was to ride a bicycle from Mexico to Argentina. And I was wanting to explore like concepts like social capital. I'd been working in health and realized that, you know, unless we have this magical thing called social capital and social cohesion, we don't really get very far in any other kind of more tangible outcomes. By the end of that project, well, by the end of that ride, after 11 months of cycling, what I'd really come to was what I wanted to talk about and explore was active citizenship, which is something that I think the Town Team movement really embodies really well. So I'll hand it over to you guys to give us a bit of a explanation about why you founded the Town Team movement, what it is, and what's happening with it right now.
Over
Do you want to
Jimmy?
go first, Dean?
You go, mate.
All right, I'll start. So the Town Team movement, I guess we started it, exactly those two words, active citizenship. So we're really in existence ultimately to inspire active citizenship and support citizens who want to contribute to making a better society, better places, better communities, and we do that in a number of ways. But I guess maybe a little bit of context, certainly from my perspective, around I guess over the last 100 years or so, you know, with the rise of consumerism and sort of, you know, big government or whatever, that there has been this sort of trend that's been occurring where government and business do everything and active citizens do less and less. And so what that means, or what that is doing ultimately, is taking individual citizen power away by taking their responsibility away. And it's leading to a lot of, although it sounds great, you know, people have to do less, you know, great, the government will do it, or great, you know, business will do it. It's actually causing enormous problems, social problems, and as you say, depleting social capital, because people are basically becoming infants instead of adults, because, you know, the adults are the governments and the citizen is becoming smaller and smaller, and so that leads on to issues around isolation, depression, hopelessness, anger, frustration, disconnection, you know, all sorts of things. Whereas back in the old days, you know, 100 years ago, or maybe, you know, people used to muck in, you know, they used to support each other in, you know, robust communities, tight-knit communities, you know, and that sort of, the social stuff that you don't really see, that relationship stuff that isn't tangible. It's more, you know, feelings. It's hard to quantify, and it's hard to, you know, assess, measure, you know, put into a box or whatever. So it does sort of get left behind in a sort of modern day data driven society. And so, I guess that, you know, let's start with the big stuff there. So, you know, enter Town Team. I mean, the Town Team's essentially local. It's sort of within the placemaking philosophy and also localism philosophies. So it's locally based activation and connection activities done by volunteers who are local businesses and residents, working collaboratively and proactively with their local governments, to usually around a town centre or a main street, and they use their contribution, the physical contribution to place, as a way to also build social capital and connections. And so that could be whether via a markets or a festival, or it could be artwork or community garden, or any of the great stuff that can lead to better main streets and town centres that communities can do on their own or with just a little bit of help from government.
Yeah. So how does a town team actually form? Like, how does it get together in the first place?
So I guess the interesting thing about this that no one person or organisations designed this. This is sort of bubbled up from experience and from the grassroots. So it can start in different ways, but as Jimmy mentioned, it's local businesses, residents and landowners getting together and doing something positive in their local area, and hopefully building a relationship and working with their local government. So often it's starting with a few conversations, people saying, oh, I'm frustrated about this, or I'd love to see that, or why don't we do this? So it might be over some coffee or some beers, and really highlighting either some needs or some opportunities to improve a place. And going from there, really. So we recommend that teams start off in a small way. So it could be starting some conversations. It could be doing some placemaking activities. It could be doing an event. Sometimes local governments also initiate a town team because they've seen the success of the model in other places. So they might actually engage town team movement to come in there and do some work and help a group to form, because even though it's such a great idea and an exciting opportunity, it doesn't just happen. It needs some momentum, but it needs a bit of a catalyst as well. So having a catalyst either provided by local people or by the local government is the way a team forms.
And I imagine like the role you guys play in sort of providing a basic framework, some principles, a little bit of support in the way of resources, just, helps people not have to reinvent the wheel in every single place.
Yeah, exactly right. And we can learn all the lessons that many people have learned on this journey over the last, 10 years or so. So that's kind of our role, is to provide underarching support. So we don't tell people what to do, but we provide support, inspiration, resources, ideas, get-togethers. So we're there to kind of foster and to grow the movement and be there when people need help. And I guess we're starting from, if we make it easier for people to do, it's more likely to happen. And as Jimmy mentioned, this stuff, whilst it sounds exciting and wonderful and important, it doesn't just happen. It needs some people to lead it or get behind it. And I think that's one of the big things I've learned, is that governments in particular, but our whole society is based on individuals. And what we do is work with groups. So we're trying to help groups form, and groups work better together and form relationships with other groups in the area. And then people can come and go from that group, and you have some great leaders, but the leaders can't be there forever. But it's the success of the group which defines the success of both the individual place and the team, but also hopefully the success of our movement.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, I think that's really important. It's something, I think about, the tagline for Conversations on Transition is resilience and regeneration in WA. And I think a key part of the regeneration aspect is also just regenerating our capacity to work together, because we have been, so atomized for so long that those ways of working together in groups, we might be able to do it sometimes when it's sort of like, in a paid job, but just how do we get together and form some sort of cohesive unit to get something done when it doesn't involve sort of, okay, this is your job description and this is your role and here are our processes. We sort of no longer have such a strong cultural framework to enable that just to happen in the civic space. So I think it's a really important gap that you guys are filling in there. And I guess on that topic, with the conversations being around resilience and regeneration, do you have any stories that you like to share with us to sort of, paint the picture of how town teams can kind of add to those capacities? Maybe even, I'm not sure what's going on with town teams during this time of COVID-19, but perhaps you've seen some ways that that cohesion amongst communities has enabled them to kind of pull together, or, you know, you might have some reflections on like the local economy aspect, but I'll leave it to you guys wherever you'd like to take it or share.
Well, I guess, you know, the first one that comes to mind is obviously, yeah, all the activities that were happening during COVID, which, you know, is exactly what we're advocating for. I mean, we saw, you know, heaps of front yard placemaking by communities. So we saw, you know, chalk rainbows and drawings by children, teddy bears on the fences, driveway dinners. We saw communities mobilising around local food businesses and putting, notifying communities by their social media networks about what businesses were open, who's doing takeaway, try and support them. Yeah, I mean, so many things where, you know, I really feel that, you know, that sort of during that crisis and where people can feel, you know, rocked and a bit unsafe, that they do kind of tend to rally around each other and want to support each other and appreciate each other so much more. And so, yeah, we saw heaps of examples during COVID of all that really great, important stuff. Again, you know, you can't really quantify it,
No.
but it's
yeah, it's probably
you
hard
know,
to plan for as well. Like, you know, when you're designing the, you know, the design principles for the Town Teams movement, you probably think, oh, there's all these things that can happen as a result of the extra connections amongst people, but you can't sort of plan or dictate exactly how that's going to, you know, emerge and the things that are going to result out of it. So it must have been pretty wonderful to see all that.
yeah, it was amazing. And of course, you know, it's not just Town Teams doing that stuff. There's many other people and communities, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Town Teams is just one vehicle of that sort of regenerative activity, the community activity that can occur. So as Dean was saying before, and just touching on what you were saying there with the principal stuff, that is our approach. So essentially any group can be a town team if they're a mix of residents and businesses within a geographical place. But the only thing we ask of them is to sign up to our Charter of Principles,
Oh, nice.
which is, as Dean was saying, is, I guess, lessons learned that we've learned along the way. You know, the first town team, Dean was part of the Beaufort Street Network about almost 10 years ago now. And I was involved in the second town team, Leader Will Connect. And, you know, there's been a lot of lessons that we've learned as a community, which we've sort of documented into this charter, I guess, of guidelines. And, you know, that includes be positive and proactive. You know, don't start throwing stones or burning bridges, because, yeah, you know, it's about trying to contribute to the community to make it better and you know, working with each other. Being apolitical, so don't get involved in politics. And there's various reasons for that. One thing, it can just be really draining. Two things, is it can also backfire if you choose a side. You know, we've seen some horrible examples over the years of, one side taking away the lollies from the other side. And yeah, there's sort of various other principles that we've sort of learned that we.
Yeah, I think the other one that's really important, Jimmy, is action focus, because there are a lot of groups out there in the community that are effectively lobby groups, and there's an important place for that in our system. But that's actually quite disempowering in that you're just there to lobby, you know, a change to a particular policy of government or funding program. And really, the town teams are about doing stuff. So it doesn't mean you're doing stuff all the time, but it's more focused on action and doing rather than just talking and lobbying. So that's an important distinction as well. So the teams really exemplify that kind of approach of just getting out there and doing stuff. And you can't do everything. We're never going to be building train lines or building buildings, but get out there and do what you want to do in your place. and all the teams have a different focus. So some might be more involved in local business and activation of main streets. Some might be more involved in environmental programs or greening. Some might be involved in social justice or other social activities. So the model's extremely flexible. And the only requirement, as Jimmy said, or the foundation stone of what a town team is that Charter of Behaviour. And if you sign up to the Charter of Behaviour, we'd love you to do whatever you want to do rather than doing a particular thing or a particular program. So it's a very flexible model, very simple model, but it means that it can translate easily from a country town to a suburb in a city or a street or a main town centre. So it can apply across different contexts, and people to sign up to that Charter of Behaviour, which is the foundation of the movement.
That's really great. And probably going to throw a question in there that I didn't prepare you for. But as you're speaking, the beauty of having, how many teams have you got now across WA?
47 official
yeah.
teams. Yeah, they've signed up to the charter, but there's more teams emerging already. So,
yeah, wonderful. I was just thinking, I mean, I knew you had quite a few now. When you have a bunch of different teams operating all on the same set of principles, you then create the possibility for that, next, like what happens when all those teams get together. You've already got like a shared set of principles, a shared language and values, so that it makes it easier for those teams then to work together if, that's the right time to be discussing that. But I know that you have a conference coming up at the end of July when the teams get an opportunity to get together. So I was wondering, either have you already seen that sort of next layer of emergence coming with the town team movement? Like, has there been much discussion amongst the different teams? And, is that somewhere where you see it maybe heading? Is, what happens next when you've got a bunch of really active and engaged teams?
Yeah, I know you, and you're dead right, Claire. I mean, it's always almost, electrifying whenever we get the teams together in a room. There's always so much energy and excitement because it is, I don't know what the science would be, similar atoms colliding, like-minded individuals getting together. And I guess because it is, based on positivity and ideas and contribution and doing that, when those people get together, you get a whole bunch of people in a room who are positive and want to do stuff and, excited. And so definitely it makes, whenever we get the teams together, it's amazing. And there's, it's so supportive and collaborative. I mean, one of the first times we got the teams together, the Scarborough Beach guys bumped into the Inglewood guys, and Inglewood guys were talking to them about their Inglewood markets, and then suddenly they were helping them do the Scarborough Beach markets, and then, so all those sort of things start to emerge where, the teams start collaborating or learning from the other teams, which is just beautiful. That's the magic.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any other reflections you wanted to add on the, how town teams kind of exemplifies what we can do in terms of resilience and regeneration?
Just that. Oh, sorry, you go, Dave.
No, you go, Jimmy.
I was just going to say, just that I think, given that we have just come out of a crisis, that I think that there is, certainly on that resilience side, and we have seen similar models around the world. San Francisco has a sort of similar model to town teams, but it is more about resilience, and it did pop up after their California bushfires, and which is where they recognise that having close-knit communities builds resilience in times of crisis. And I mean, no one wants to hear it, but obviously, in a world of climate change and massive disruption, environmental disruption going on, we are going to have crisis upon crisis probably over the next indefinite time. And so that, having these more resilient, connected you know, high social capital communities that can support each other is actually going to be critical, I reckon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that resilience can't come from the top. It's not going to be created by a nationwide resilience strategy. It comes from the bottom, and it comes, as Jimmy said, at the community and the street level. And that makes it even more important to support the town teams or the local community groups or the doers in a community to do more stuff.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's still the disconnect at the moment, in that the top-down approach, and businesses still think that the old way of doing things is a way to create resilience, when it's in fact the opposite. And a top-down approach is inherently not resilient, because as soon as there's a crisis at the top or in that government funding structure, then we end up with even worse problems down the track. So I think it's trying to create lots of tiny little experiments and lots of little actions in many, many places, and learning from those and making that stuff easier to do, rather than a top-down approach.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, let's face it, at the bottom is where, the things that people actually really need exist.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still seems crazy to me in Australia that growing a fruit tree on your verge is illegal. What a rich country we are to make it illegal to grow food, and yet we're talking about local food problems and nutrition and health and all that kind of thing. So some of our basic mindsets are really the opposite of what we need to be doing with resilience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it sort of talks to our human needs as well. It's interesting. I've been reading Scott Barry Kaufman. Claire, I think we've spoken about Scott
just a few times.
Reading his book, Transcendence, and he's sort of done a revision of the Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs work, and he sort of remodeled it. Instead of sort of being this pyramid that you climb, it's what was never meant to be that. And he's sort of uses the metaphor of this sailboat, that you're on you're a sailboat sailing out into the ocean, exploring life in any direction that you choose. But at the hub of the sailboat is your basic human psychological needs, which sort of beyond obviously food, shelter, water, but then you sort of going into and at the fundamental base is that need for connection, need for belonging, self-esteem, like those sort of basic, they're actual fundamental psychological needs that we need as humans in order to have those higher level, I guess, needs around creativity and what he talks about being transcendence, which is but there's a massive part of that sort of journey is to the transcendence, or historically self-actualization is once you've got those sort of sense of belonging and connection and everything, it's then also giving back to society. Actually is a massive part of, and you can't trick yourself, like giving back, being in the job that you hate or something, it's maybe not necessarily giving back, so be good. I think you know what I mean anyway.
Transcendence isn't going to God or moving into becoming a fifth dimensional being or something like that, or whatever the language is. Transcendence is about transcending your own ego and actually then being able to be of service to the whole. It's not just an individualistic model. It's actually, how do we make sure the individual has what they need so that then they can actually, transcend the ego and become part of the whole.
Yeah, and then by doing that, then you can then that's that whole thing of, you can really operate in high functioning teams, right? Because often it's those egos that trip things up. If you've transcended your ego and you're working in an amazing team just for the greater good, then I don't know if there's anything better for me in life. That's just,
exactly. I feel like there's a whole other conversation that we could have there, and maybe we will have it actually. But in terms of wrapping up, so if people want to get involved in town teams, how do they get in touch, get on board?
I'd start by following us on social media. So we've got townteammovement.com, but then there's 47 town teams in local areas, mainly in WA. But yeah, there's lots of ways you can get involved.
Great. And the conference at the end of the month, you can find that obviously on the Town Teams website.
Yeah, the Shift Innovative, what is it called, Jimmy?
Cooperative innovation.
Cooperative innovation. Yeah, we've got information on our website, and tickets are free for members of Town Teams, and only $45 for others. So it's going to be a fantastic experience.
Beautiful. Sounds exciting.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that we want to have around, you know, what is this new normal that everyone's talking about, and how do we bring it about, rather than, you know, bouncing back to building roads and renovating houses. You know, again, talking about how do we keep that social capital or progress that social capital that was being generated during the crisis, and how do we work together better and
bounce back.
Bounce forward, yes. Peter Newman, I think that, didn't he? Yes, I like that. How do we bounce forward?
Great. All right. So I'll put the links in the notes underneath, or however it appears on Mighty Networks. Might be above, might be underneath, yet to be determined, but it'll be there for you, whoever's watching, to find. And thank you guys very much for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing where the discussion goes from here.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Great. Thank you so much.
See ya.
Bye.